This one is titled, "My fiancée said she's pregnant, but wants to put her ex's name on the birth certificate, so I got a paternity test and exposed everything." Hit that subscribe button, and honestly this story right here had me staring at my screen with my mouth open, because we've got a guy just 2 weeks out from his wedding, everything going well, life feeling steady and solid, and then his fiancée sends him a text that changes everything. And I mean everything, not because she said something cruel or started a fight, but because she accidentally revealed something about herself in a way that was so unbelievably careless it almost didn't feel real. And you're going to want to sit down for this one, so let's get into it. He starts off like this. "So I was at my desk at work. I do logistics for a shipping company. I've been there about 4 years. It's a decent gig, and my phone goes off. It's a text from Brooke, my fiancée, and we're 2 weeks out from the wedding. Everything is booked. The venue, the photographer, the catering, the DJ. We're at least 15 grand deep into this thing. So I figured it was something about flowers or seating charts because that's basically all we'd been texting about for weeks. I open it up and it says, 'Honey, I'm pregnant,' and my heart just stops, then starts racing like crazy. Pregnant, we were going to have a baby. I'm sitting there at my desk grinning like an idiot, my hands shaking a little while I try to process it, and the guy in the cubicle next to me, Kevin, nice dude who's always eating those weird protein bars that smell like sawdust, looks over and asks if I'm okay. And I just nod because I'm more than okay. This is huge. This changes the whole picture. We weren't just getting married anymore. We were starting a family. And in that 5-second window, I'm already thinking about nursery colors, whether we'd need a bigger place, how I'm going to tell my parents, all of it rushing in at once. Then I keep reading, and the next line says, "I'm thinking of putting Nolan's name on the birth certificate. It's more meaningful," and the grin disappears instantly like someone flipped a switch. I read it again, then again, because my brain refuses to accept what I'm seeing. She wants to name our baby after her ex-boyfriend. More meaningful, those were her exact words. More meaningful than what? Than me, the actual father. And the happiness I felt seconds ago turns cold and sharp. And I'm wondering why. That would even cross her mind, why naming our child after another man would somehow be more meaningful. And then I tell myself to stop, to think clearly, because she said she's pregnant. She didn't say the baby wasn't mine. But that comment, that strange, out-of-nowhere reference to her ex's name, it doesn't sit right, and my mind starts connecting dots I don't want to connect. When was the last time we were together? Maybe 3 weeks ago, maybe 4. Has she been acting a little distant? Lately, kind of yes, and now everything feels blurry as I try to think it through. So I stare at the message until my screen goes dark. Turn it back on. Read it again, the words are still the same. Nothing has changed, and instead of exploding, I type something sarcastic back, saying, "What? Great news. Congratulations," because sarcasm feels safer than starting a war right there. I need information first, not accusations. I need to see how she responds, to figure out what's actually happening. Because right now all I have is a horrible gut feeling and one very suspicious text. So I grab my jacket and walk out of the office while my supervisor calls after me asking where I'm going. But I don't answer. I get in my car and sit there gripping the wheel, and then my phone goes off again. It's Brooke saying she's so happy I'm excited and that we should celebrate tonight, and excited, that's not what I'm feeling at all. I'm feeling a mix of confusion, suspicion, and something heavier, and I realize I need to talk to someone who might give me real answers before I confront her directly. Someone who would react honestly if there was something to hide. So I pull up maps on my phone and think about Nolan, her ex, because she once pointed out his neighborhood during a drive maybe 6 months ago, mentioning that he got married, settled down, and bought a house near the lake. At the time it felt like harmless conversation, but now it feels different, and the drive takes about 40 minutes, 40 minutes of my mind spinning through every possible explanation. Maybe she's joking, even though it's a terrible joke. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, maybe I'm overreacting, maybe I'm losing my mind over nothing. At some point I turn on the radio and a love song starts playing. I don't even remember which one, something about forever, and I change it so fast I nearly hit the wrong button and blast static through the speakers because I don't need that right now, so I switch to sports talk instead. 2 guys arguing about trade rumors, and that feels better, just noise I can manage. But throughout the drive that phrase keeps repeating in my head, more meaningful than the actual father's name, and I keep thinking, how does that even make sense unless the actual father is someone else? And by the time I pull up to a 2-story house with gray siding and a clean front yard, with a blue sedan in the driveway next to a silver SUV, my thoughts are already racing ahead of me. I parked across the street and sat there for a minute, staring at the house and asking myself what I was doing, wondering if I was really about to accuse a guy I'd never met of sleeping with my fiancée based on one strange text. And the honest answer was yes, because that message felt too specific to be random and too unusual to be innocent. And I told myself that if I was wrong I would apologize and leave, but if I was right I needed to see his face when I brought it up. So I got out of the car, walked up to the door and knocked. 3 solid knocks with my heart pounding while I kept my expression calm, and a woman opened the door, blonde, athletic, mid-30s, and I immediately assumed she had to be Nolan's wife. And she asked, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Hi, sorry to bother you, is Nolan home?" And she replied that he was at work and asked who I was. So I pulled out my phone and showed her the text. Watching her eyes scan the words, watching her face shift from confusion to shock to something I couldn't quite identify, and I told her, "I'm Brooke's fiancé. She just sent me this. I don't know what it means. I was hoping your husband might." And her hand went to her mouth as she said, "What? Why would she say that?" And I answered, "That's what I'm trying to figure out." And she stepped back from the door while already dialing Nolan, telling him to come home immediately without explaining why, only repeating that it was urgent. Her voice shaking the entire time, saying he'd be there in 20 minutes, and then she told me I could wait, so I did, standing on the porch in heavy silence while she kept glancing at my phone screen like she needed to confirm it was real, and my phone buzzed with Brooke calling, but I declined it because she could wait, and for a moment I stopped and thought about what this day looked like from the outside, because he had woken up planning a wedding, received what should have been the happiest message of his life, and now he was standing on a stranger's porch trying to decide whether his entire relationship was built on a lie, and just 2 hours earlier he had been discussing seating charts, and now he was questioning whether the baby was even his, because that's how quickly everything can change. One text message, and as the minutes passed, 18 of them, a silver SUV came racing down the street and pulled sharply into the driveway. Nolan stepped out, tall, business, casual, clean-cut, and the moment he saw me standing there with his wife his face went pale, and he asked, "What's going on?" And I held up my phone and said, "Brooke sent me this today, thought you'd want to see it," and he took the phone and read it, his expression shifting from confusion to horror in about 3 seconds, and he said, "What the? I haven't talked to Brooke in years," and I asked, "Then why would she mention your name?" And his wife's voice turned sharp as she demanded the same thing, and he insisted he didn't know, suddenly looking panicked, which made me think about how innocent people get confused but guilty people panic. And I took the phone back and told him she was pregnant and that she wanted to put his name on the birth certificate because it was more meaningful, asking him directly if that meant nothing to him, and his voice rose as he said he was married and hadn't been anywhere near her, while his wife's eyes filled with tears, and she asked him again why Brooke would say this, and he repeated that maybe she was lying or trying to start something, and I watched him carefully, seeing the defensiveness, trying to decide whether it was genuine or just a cover, because it was hard to tell. But either way I had done what I came for, planted the seed and created some chaos, which meant I would have more to work with when I finally spoke to Brooke, so I said I would go talk to her, and Nolan grabbed my arm asking what I was going to tell her, and I replied that I would tell her the truth, that I had come here, that he had denied everything, and that I wanted answers, and he let go, running his hand through his hair and insisting it was crazy and that he hadn't done anything, and I simply said we would see, then walked back to my car while hearing them begin to argue behind me, her voice rising and his denials growing louder, and I sat inside for a moment as my phone kept blowing up, with Brooke texting again and again asking where I was and why I wasn't answering and begging me to call her. But I didn't respond. I started the engine and drove to her apartment, and when I arrived the door flew open before I even finished knocking because she had clearly been waiting right there. Her eyes red and puffy, her hair messy, wearing one of my old hoodies, the gray one I had left months ago, and that small detail made my chest tighten unexpectedly. And she said, "Oh, thank God. I've been calling you for an hour, where have you been?" And I walked past her without answering and sat on the couch where there was a half-eaten bowl of cereal on the coffee table and her laptop open to a wedding planning website. The irony almost making me laugh, and I looked at her and said, "Tell me about the text," and she replied that she knew it sounded strange and that she wasn't thinking clearly when she wrote it, and I repeated wasn't thinking clearly because she had written 2 complete sentences with punctuation, specifically saying that putting her ex's name on our baby's birth certificate would be more meaningful, which takes thought, Brooke, and she began scrambling, overwhelmed, explaining that pregnancy hormones had brought up old feelings about people who had been important in her life, and I asked if they were important enough to name our kid after. She stumbled and said, "No, that's not what I meant." I asked her, "Then what did you mean?" Small words so I can understand. She tried to explain, saying she just thought maybe it could be used as a middle name to honor a relationship that had been important to her at one point, that Nolan had been a big part of her life. I immediately held my hand up and said, "Stop. You want to give our baby your ex-boyfriend's name to honor him while you're marrying me?" She replied, "When you say it like that, it sounds bad." And I told her, because it is bad. At that moment my phone went off, so I pulled it out and saw an unknown number texting. "Tell your crazy fiancée to leave me alone. I'm happily married and want nothing to do with her drama. She's lying about everything." I turned the screen toward her and said, "This from Nolan." Her face went completely white and she asked, "Why is he texting you?" I told her I went to his house. She stood up so fast she knocked over her water glass on the coffee table, and water went everywhere, but neither of us moved to clean it up. She looked at me and said, "You what?" And I answered that I sat down with him and his wife, had a nice chat, showed them her text and wanted to see how they'd react. She said, "You had no right." And I replied, "I had every right. You sent me a message that made me question everything, so I went looking for answers, which seemed like the smart move." By then she was spiraling, crying harder, talking about how we were supposed to be getting married in 2 weeks, how we were supposed to be happy about this baby, and how I was treating her like a criminal. That's when I said it clearly, "Take a paternity test." She went completely still, like I'd unplugged her, and asked, "What?" "A blood test at a medical facility to prove the baby's mine, because if it is we move forward, and if it isn't," I didn't finish the sentence. She snapped back that it was insane and that she shouldn't have to prove anything to me, and I told her she was right, that in a normal situation she wouldn't, but this wasn't normal and she made it abnormal when she sent that text. I started walking toward the door and told her to schedule the test and send me the appointment details, and until then I didn't want to hear from her. Not a call, not a text, nothing. She asked where I was going, and I said away from here because I needed to think, and I couldn't do that with her crying in front of me. I opened the door and added that about the wedding. I had canceled it that afternoon right after getting her text. She gasped, asking if I had canceled our wedding, her voice cracking, and I told her I could uncancel it if the test proved I was wrong. But I doubted it would. Then I walked out, closed the door, heard her sobbing through it, and didn't turn back. And for a second, just stop and think about that, because this man canceled his wedding, $15,000, 2 weeks out, all because one text message didn't make sense, and people might call him paranoid or say he overreacted. But ask yourself honestly, if your partner texted you saying they wanted to name your baby after their ex because it was more meaningful, would you just shrug it off? No, you wouldn't. Nobody would. That's not paranoia, that's pattern recognition. Anyway, back to the story. I drove to my parents' house because I needed to tell them before Brooke did. I needed to get ahead of it before things spiraled further, because I had a horrible feeling that this was only the beginning, and my mom opened the door before I could even knock, wearing that look moms get when they sense something is wrong. So I went inside and sat in the living room while my dad muted the TV, which had been playing some fishing show where the guy on screen was holding up a bass that was way too small to be so excited about, and I told them wedding's off for now anyway. Then I explained everything, the text, the visit to Nolan's house, the confrontation, and the demand for a paternity test, and I watched their faces move through confusion, shock, and anger, and my dad said I did the right thing, adding that something was off here, but I still wondered out loud, what if I was wrong? What if she really just had a moment of stupidity and I was blowing up our whole relationship over nothing? And my mom responded firmly that the test would prove it, and if she had nothing to hide, she shouldn't have a problem taking it. That night I barely slept, replaying every possible scenario in my head. Best case, the baby was mine and Brooke had said something monumentally stupid that she would spend years making up for. Worst case, she had cheated, gotten pregnant by her ex, and tried to pass the baby off as mine. And there was no real middle ground because this felt black and white, and I remember lying there around 2 in the morning staring at the ceiling fan spinning overhead while my roommate's cat scratched at my door, which was annoying but strangely comforting because at least something in my life was acting normally, and I think I finally fell asleep around 4, waking up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. And the next morning there were 17 missed calls and 32 texts, so I made myself coffee before reading any of them, even using the good beans I'd been saving, because if my life was going to fall apart, I might as well have decent coffee while it happened. And most of the messages said, "Please talk to me, I can explain everything," but one stood out, saying, "Fine." I scheduled the test. Next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Harbor Medical Center. Are you happy now? Tuesday came, and then it was 6 days of waiting, 6 days of slowly going insane, 6 days of everyone in my life having an opinion about what I should do. So I texted back, "I'll be there." And I watched the 3 dots appear, disappear, then appear again, and during that time I should mention I took the whole week off work, told my boss it was a family emergency, and he didn't ask questions, just said handle it, which felt like a small blessing because there was absolutely no way I was going to be useful at that desk for the next 6 days. And one afternoon I tried reading a book, but I ended up reading the same page 4 times and couldn't tell you a single word from it. And then Wednesday afternoon an unknown number called and I almost didn't answer. But I did, and a tight, controlled voice said, "Hello, this is Megan, Nolan's wife. We need to talk." And she asked me to confirm that the text was real, and I offered to forward screenshots and she believed me. And then she told me Nolan had been acting strange since I showed up at their house, defensive, angry, snapping at her over nothing, and this part made my stomach drop because he suddenly wouldn't let her see his phone anymore, which was new, very new, because before this week they had an open phone policy, but now his phone was password protected and he carried it everywhere, even to the bathroom, and the truth is people don't suddenly lock down their phones unless they're hiding something. That's just a fact of life. You don't wake up one morning and decide your wife of 6 years can't see your screen unless there's something on that screen you don't want her seeing. And she asked, "Is Brooke taking the test?" And I said, "Tuesday." And she asked if I would tell her the results because she deserved to know if her husband had been lying to her. And I promised her I would, and I meant it. And then Thursday Brooke's mother called and she came in swinging, asking how I could cancel the wedding and if I had any idea how humiliating this was for their family. And I told her with all respect that her daughter was the one who made this humiliating, that she had made a mistake, just one silly comment, and I was told it wasn't silly, it was specific and concerning, and she accused me of being paranoid and cruel and insisted that the baby was mine. And that Brooke loved me, so I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. And over the next few days I received calls from Brooke's dad, her sister, her best friend, every single one telling me I was overreacting and defending her, and not one of them, not a single one, could explain why she had said what she said in the first place. They just kept repeating that she was emotional and that pregnancy hormones explained it, as if hormones explain wanting to put your ex-boyfriend's name on a birth certificate. And then Friday night Brooke texted asking if we could please talk face to face because she missed me, and I stared at that message for a long time sitting on my bed, because part of me wanted to see her and wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding. But the smarter part of me, the part that read that text and felt his whole world crack, knew better, so I replied that it would be after the test, not before, and she asked if I really didn't trust her at all, and I asked myself should I, and there was no response. And on Saturday Nolan left a voicemail, his voice tight and angry, saying his wife was filing for divorce because of my accusation, that 6 years of marriage were falling apart, and that if the test showed he wasn't the father he would sue me for defamation. And I saved the voicemail because I might need it, and Sunday felt like the longest day of my life. So I cleaned my apartment twice just to have something to do with my hands. And I organized my closet by color, which is something I've literally never done before and will probably never do again. And that night Brooke texted one last time saying she was scared, and I almost didn't respond, but something made me type back that I was scared too. And she asked what if this ruined us, and I told her it already had and that the test would just confirm what was true, and she said she loved me, and I didn't answer because honestly I didn't know how I felt anymore, because love needs trust, and trust was in very short supply. And I want you to picture this week, Sunday through Saturday, waiting and not knowing, with every single person telling him he was wrong, her family attacking him, her friends attacking him, and he's just sitting there thinking, I know what I read, I know what my gut is telling me, and that takes a different kind of strength, not anger, discipline, because the easy thing would have been to believe her, but the hard thing was standing in the fire and waiting for proof. And now back to it. Tuesday morning I was awake at 5, didn't need the 3 alarms I had set, and I drove to Harbor Medical Center with my hands steady on the wheel but my heart racing, and Brooke pulled in at 9:55, and she looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, hair in a messy ponytail, wearing sweats and an oversized hoodie, and when she saw my car she hesitated before walking toward the building. And we didn't speak, we checked in separately and sat on opposite sides of the waiting room, and the nurse called us back together into a small room with 2 chairs and a counter full of medical supplies. And the blood draw took 10 minutes, and Brooke went first, and I watched the needle go in and watched the vial fill, because that blood was going to tell me everything I needed to know at my turn next, and I could barely feel it because I was too focused on Brooke's face, and she looked terrified, and people with nothing to hide don't look terrified. And we walked out separately, and I made it to my car before she called out behind me asking, "Wait, please, can we talk? Just 5 minutes?" And I asked, "About what?" "About us, about how we fix this," and I turned around and said, "There's nothing to fix yet, we wait for results. Then we'll see if there's anything left to fix." And she asked, "You really think I cheated on you?" And I told her I think she gave me every reason to wonder that it was on her, not me. Then I got in my car, drove away, and left her standing in the parking lot. And the next 7 days were brutal, everybody calling and nobody having answers, my family trying to be supportive while secretly hoping I was wrong. and I could see it in their faces. They wanted the baby to be mine, wanted the whole thing to be a misunderstanding, and I wanted that too, but wanting something doesn't make it real, and it was a Thursday, I remember, because wait, no, it was a Friday actually, and I kept mixing those days up because the whole week blurred together into one long horrible stretch of time. But yes, Friday around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was sitting on my parents' back porch because I'd basically been living there all week, when the phone rang from an unknown number, and it was Harbor Medical Center calling regarding lab results for Brooke Keller and myself, and everything stopped like the whole world went quiet for a second, and I said, yes, this is him, and they told me the results were ready and that they could email them to both parties or I could pick up physical copies at the front desk, and I said, email, please, and they said they would arrive within the next few minutes and to have a good day, and the lady had no idea she was about to change my entire life with a PDF attachment, and I sat there on the porch steps, opened my email, refreshed, nothing, refreshed again, nothing, and there was a bird sitting on the fence across the yard just staring at me, and I remember that because I was staring back at it, thinking this is ridiculous. I'm having a staring contest with a bird while waiting to find out if my fiancé destroyed my life, and I refreshed a third time and saw a new email from Harbor Medical Center, clicked it, and the PDF loaded slowly, way too slow, and my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone as the document filled the screen with medical terms, numbers, and charts, and I scrolled past all of it looking for the only line that mattered. And I found it, probability of paternity 0%, based on the genetic markers analyzed. The tested man is excluded as the biological father, 0% excluded, and I read it 3 times just to make sure my brain wasn't playing tricks on me. But it was clear, brutally, undeniably clear, the baby was not mine, and I read it again, clear, brutal, undeniable, the baby wasn't mine, and I sat there on those porch steps staring at those words and felt absolutely nothing. Not angry, not sad, not relieved. Just empty, like someone had scooped everything out of me and left the shell sitting there holding a phone, and then it rang, and it was Brooke, and I answered, and she asked if I got it in a small voice, and I said yeah, and there was a long heavy silence before she whispered that she was so sorry, and I asked if it was true, if she cheated, and she said it was one time, one stupid mistake, that she didn't mean for this to happen with Nolan, and I asked when, and she said about a month ago at a friend's get-together, that one thing led to another, and it just happened a month ago while we were planning our wedding. While I was calling vendors and confirming the guest list, while she was trying on dresses and showing me flower samples, she was with her ex, and I asked if he knew, and she said not for sure, that she told him it might be his and he's been panicking ever since, and I said, so you were just going to marry me and pretend the baby was mine, and she said she thought maybe it was, and she wasn't sure, and I said, but you knew it might not be and you didn't tell me, and she was crying hard now saying she made a horrible mistake but loved me and we could still fix this, and I laughed because I couldn't help it, it just came out, and I said, fix this. Brooke, you're pregnant with another man's baby. A man you cheated on me with while we were picking out wedding centerpieces. What exactly is there to fix? And she said we could get through this together. And I told her no, we can't, we're done. And I stood up and told her she needed to tell Nolan because he deserved to know he was about to be a father. And she asked what about us? And I said there is no us, there hasn't been since the night she slept with him, I just didn't know it yet. Then I hung up, blocked her number, and forwarded the test results to Megan with one line saying she was right to file for divorce. And she responded in seconds thanking me and saying she was sorry I had to go through this, and I just kept thinking, hold on, because it just happened, that's what she said. It just happened, like it was an accident, like she tripped and fell into her ex-boyfriend. But no, you made a choice. You made a series of choices. You chose to stay, you chose to go further, you chose to hide it, you chose to send that text and hope nobody would connect the dots. And the only reason any of this came out is because she was stupid enough to mention his name in the same message where she announced the pregnancy. And she told on herself, and that's not an accident, that's karma, and okay, back to it, I called my parents and told them everything. Mom cried. Dad just said, come home, we'll figure out the next steps. But first, I had one more thing to do, so I drove to Brooke's apartment and used my key one last time. And she was sitting on the couch exactly where I knew she'd be, and I said, I want every penny back, everything I spent on the wedding, the deposits, the venue, the photographer, the catering, all of it. And she said she didn't have that kind of money, and I told her then figure it out. Sell something, borrow from your parents, I don't care, but you're paying me back every dollar, and she said that wasn't fair, and I just stared at her and said, you cheated on me, got pregnant by your ex, tried to trick me into raising his baby, and you want to talk about fair, and there was nothing left for her to say, nothing at all, she had nothing, so I put my key on the counter and said, goodbye, Brooke, and I walked out for the last time, got in my car, and drove away from the biggest mistake I almost made, and on Saturday morning I sent a group text to both families, Brooke's parents, her sister, my parents, my brother, and I wrote, family meeting, my parents' house, 2 p.m. today, everyone needs to be there, and Brooke's mom called immediately asking what this was about, and I told her she'd find out at 2, and I got there early, set up the dining room table, moved Mom's centerpiece to the side, and she gave me a look but didn't say anything, and I printed copies of the test results, 5 copies, 1 for each party, and when people started showing up the confusion was thick, you could feel it in the room, and my brother pulled me aside in the kitchen asking what was going on, and I told him to sit down and wait, and Brooke arrived last, looking like she hadn't slept in a week, which honestly she probably hadn't, and her parents flanked her on either side like bodyguards, and her sister stayed near the door like she wasn't sure she wanted to be there, which was probably smart instinct, and everybody sat down, and the dining room felt smaller than usual with that many people crowded around the table, and Dad had made coffee but nobody touched it. They just sat there with their hands in their laps waiting. And her dad spoke first saying, "All right, what's this about?" And I handed everyone a copy and watched their faces as they read it one by one like dominoes falling in slow motion. And I said, 0% probability of paternity, the baby's not mine. And if you want to know whose it is, Brooke's mother went pale, saying this can't be right, and I told her it's right. Brooke cheated on me with Nolan about a month ago, got pregnant, tried to hide it, and that text about naming the baby after him was her guilt talking, and her dad turned to her and asked if it was true. And she nodded while tears rolled down her face. And her mom's voice cracked as she said, "You cheated while planning your wedding?" And Brooke said it was a mistake. And I replied that it was a mistake that cost me $15,000 in wedding expenses, which she was going to pay back every penny. And her mom said they didn't have that kind of money, and her dad said then sell her car, take out a loan, figure it out, and my mom touched my arm softly and said, "Honey, maybe we should." But I said she made her choice, she deals with the consequences, and Brooke's sister said I was being cruel, and I told her I was being fair, that she tried to trap me into raising another man's child, and cruel would be pressing charges, which shut everybody up, and then I asked if Nolan knew, and her father said quietly that he did now because I sent him the results this morning and his wife already filed for divorce, and Brooke sobbed louder while her mom hugged her, but even she looked disgusted, and her dad said they should go, and I said, "Good, you should feel humiliated because their daughter destroyed 2 relationships and brought a child into this mess because she couldn't keep her commitment, and they left fast, and my family stayed, and my dad asked if I was okay, and I said better than okay. I dodged a bullet, and I sat down heavy in my chair thinking, can you imagine if I'd married her? Found this out a year from now, 2 years, and Mom squeezed my shoulder and said I did the right thing, all of it. And then my phone buzzed with a text from Megan saying Nolan was freaking out and his lawyer said he'd have to pay child support and his whole life was falling apart. And I replied that we both deserved better, and word spread fast after that. Friends took sides, most took mine. Brooke's people tried defending her at first, but the facts were too ugly. She cheated, she lied, she tried to pass off another man's baby as mine. There's no spin you can put on that, and by Monday she deleted all her social media because she couldn't handle the fallout, and her best friend, a girl named Jess who I'd always gotten along with, actually texted me to say she was sorry, and that she had no idea and that Brooke had been lying to everybody, not just me, and that one hit different because Jess seemed genuinely upset, like she'd lost something too, and then Tuesday came with a check from her parents for $8,000 with a note saying it was all they could manage right now and the rest would come in payments, and I deposited it and sent them a payment plan typed up like a business document, no emotion, just numbers and dates and a signature line. That felt strange, honestly, sending a payment plan to people who had almost become my in-laws, but at that point weird had become the theme of my life, so I just accepted it and moved on. And on Wednesday I went to a clinic and got myself tested too because the last thing I needed was a parting gift from Brooke's betrayal, and the results came back clean, which felt like a small mercy. And about a month later I heard through mutual friends that Brooke and Nolan were trying to figure out some kind of arrangement for the baby, because neither of them wanted a relationship with the other, but they were stuck with an 18-year connection now whether they liked it or not. And at the same time Megan took Nolan for everything in the divorce, the house, the savings, basically his whole life, and honestly she deserved it because 6 years of marriage were destroyed when he couldn't keep his hands to himself, and Brooke's own family stopped talking to her for a while too embarrassed to deal with the fallout in their social circle. And as for me, I went back to work and started hitting the gym harder, not in some dramatic revenge body way, just because I had a lot of energy to burn and lifting heavy things helped me not think for an hour, and I reconnected with friends I'd been too busy wedding planning to see, and my buddy Ethan dragged me to pick up basketball games on Saturday mornings, and I was terrible at it, but it felt good to do something normal, and about 3 months later I actually got promoted at work, and my boss said the focus and discipline I'd shown impressed him, though I didn't tell him that the focus came from trying not to think about how close I'd come to marrying someone who was carrying another man's child while we were picking out our wedding cake flavor. And then about 4 months after everything I ran into Brooke once at a grocery store and she was visibly pregnant and looked exhausted, and we made eye contact across the produce section. She was standing near the avocados while I was grabbing apples, and for a second the entire store felt frozen, and she opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but I just kept walking, pushed my cart straight past her, and didn't look back because there was nothing left to say, and the woman standing there in front of the avocados wasn't the person I thought I was going to marry. She was just a stranger who had lied to me, and strangers don't get my time anymore, and 6 months after the breakup I received the final payment, $15,000 total, fully reimbursed, and I deposited the check at the ATM during my lunch break and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, not even relief, just a sense of being done, like closing a browser tab you forgot was still open. Chapter finished, and one night Ethan asked me about it. While we were at his place watching a game, I think it was a playoff game, but honestly I can't remember who was playing, and his TV kept doing that thing where the picture gets slightly brighter during commercials, which was driving me crazy, and he asked if I regretted how I handled everything, and I told him not for a second because that text message felt like the universe giving me a warning, and I could have ignored it, married her, and spent years raising another man's kid before discovering the truth, but instead I listened to my gut, and when he asked if I thought I'd ever trust someone like that again, I said yes, but I'd verify everything now because trust and verify aren't opposites, they work together. And anyway, 3 weeks ago Brooke texted from a new number saying she was sorry for everything and hoped I was doing well, and I blocked it without responding because some apologies come too late to matter, and honestly some apologies aren't even real apologies. They're just people trying to feel better about what they did, and I don't owe her that comfort, and I don't think she's sorry for what she did. I think she's sorry she got caught, and there's a big difference between those two things, and most people never stop to figure out which one they're actually hearing. But I did. It took me a while, but I figured it out, and last week I deleted the last photo of us from my cloud storage, removed her contact information, and cleared out every digital trace of the relationship, which only took about 20 minutes, for years of my life reduced to the time it takes to watch a sitcom episode. And that's what happens when someone lies to you. Everything shrinks. All those memories you thought mattered start to deflate once you realize half of them were built on something that wasn't real. And people ask if I'm bitter, but I'm not. I mean that I'm grateful for that stupid text message. Grateful I found out before the wedding. Grateful I had the backbone to walk away when every instinct, every memory, every late night conversation was telling me to believe her. She made her choice, I made mine. She's living with the consequences of what she did, and I'm living free, and I've started dating again recently. Nothing serious, no rush, but it feels good to be open to it without feeling like the floor might drop out from under me. And will I ever trust someone exactly the same way again? I don't know, probably not in the same way, but I'll trust smarter with my eyes open, and honestly that isn't a bad thing, that's just growing up, and I'm okay with that. Alright everyone, that's the story. And honestly, this one really stayed with me. What stands out isn't even the cheating itself. People cheat. It's terrible, but it happens. What really hits me is the boldness of that text message. She announced she was pregnant and brought up her ex's name in the same breath. That kind of thing doesn't just slip out by accident. Either she was carrying so much guilt she couldn't hold it in anymore, or she was so comfortable with the lie that she got careless. Either way, that message ended up saving this man's life. He trusted his instincts when everyone around him told him he was wrong. His fiancée, her parents, her friends, all of them insisted he was paranoid, that he was overreacting, that he was being unfair and cruel. And he stood his ground and said something isn't right. Prove me wrong. And she couldn't because he was right. So now I want to hear from you. Did he handle it the right way? Should he have given her more time to explain before canceling the wedding? And what about Nolan's wife? Do you feel sympathy for her? Or do you think she should have noticed the warning signs earlier? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd really like to know what you think about this one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that now. We share stories like this regularly, and they only get more intense from here. I'll see you in the next one.